and talked all day about the struggle between the security and the political apparatus to whether the president can get back to Washington. Well, the president is back in Washington now, and there has been no time in his presidency, and there may never be a time like this again, when it has been so important what he says to the country, because I think we all know at moments like this, the country looks to the President of the United States for understanding, for knitting the country together, and some presidents do it brilliantly, and some do not. Here is Mr. Bush. Okay, this was well, the president isn't sitting there trying to think about what to say, I can assure you. The president is sitting there because someone on network television has sat him down and said, we'll cue you in 30 seconds, Mr. Bush. And so as awkward as it looks to him, this is what we've expected him to do. And now here he is.
Good evening. Today, our fellow citizens, our way of life, our very freedom came under attack in a series of deliberate and deadly terrorist acts. The victims were in airplanes or in their offices, secretaries, businessmen and women, military and federal workers, moms and dads, friends and neighbors. Thousands of lives were suddenly ended by evil, despicable acts of terror. The pictures of airplanes flying into buildings, fires burning, huge structures collapsing, have filled us with disbelief, terrible sadness, and a quiet, unyielding anger. These acts of mass murder were intended to frighten our nation into chaos and retreat. But they have failed. Our country is strong. A great people has been moved to defend a great nation. Terrorist attacks can shake the foundations of our biggest buildings, but they cannot touch the foundation of America. These acts shatter steel, but they cannot dent the steel of American resolve. America was targeted for attack because we're the brightest beacon for freedom and opportunity in the world, and no one will keep that light from shining. Today, our nation saw evil, the very worst of human nature, and we responded with the best of America, with the daring of our rescue workers, with the caring for strangers and neighbors who came to give blood and help in any way they could. Immediately following the first attack, I implemented our government's emergency response plans. Our military is powerful, and it's prepared. Our emergency teams are working in New York City and Washington, D.C. to help with local rescue efforts. Our first priority is to get help to those who have been injured and to take every precaution to protect our citizens at home and around the world from further attacks. The functions of our government continue without interruption. Federal agencies in Washington, which had to be evacuated today, are reopening for essential personnel tonight and will be open for business tomorrow. Our financial institutions remain strong, and the American economy will be open for business as well. The search is underway for those who are behind these evil acts. I've directed the full resources of our intelligence and law enforcement communities to find those responsible and to bring them to justice. We will make no distinction between the terrorists who committed these acts and those who harbor them. I appreciate so very much the members of Congress who have joined me in strongly condemning these attacks. And on behalf of the American people, I thank the many world leaders who have called to offer their condolences and assistance. America and our friends and allies join with all those who want peace and security in the world, and we stand together to win the war against terrorism. Tonight, I ask for your prayers for all those who grieve, for the children whose worlds have been shattered, for all whose sense of safety and security has been threatened. And I pray they will be comforted by a power greater than any of us, spoken through the ages in Psalm 23. Even though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I fear no evil, for you are with me. This is a day when all Americans from every walk of life unite in our resolve for justice and peace. America has stood down enemies before, And we will do so this time. None of us will ever forget this day, yet we go forward to defend freedom and all that is good and just in our world. Thank you. Good night, and God bless America.
The President of the United States, when he is in many respects needed most. And we've been joined by George Stephanopoulos, who's been downtown all day and who very quickly picked up, George, that the President may have given us a hint in his first couple of lines there to the magnitude of this.
He said thousands of lives that were suddenly ended, the first number we've had all day by an official verifying the magnitude of the casualties. Thousands of lives suddenly ended. He also did a lot of other things in this very short speech, Peter. He gave voice to the anger that many Americans are feeling. He talked about the quiet, unyielding anger of America, and then was very pointed in giving reassurance. Military is prepared. The emergency teams are on their way. Government will be back to business tomorrow. Our economy will be back to business tomorrow. And then finally, Peter, what I found most interesting in the section about where he talked about retaliation, he said America would make no distinction between the terrorists and those who harbor them, which is a message to any state which may be supporting these terrorists who are behind this act.
Well, which creates a huge dilemma for the United States of America, because if it is discovered, as we've talked several times throughout the day, that a state, and I've forgotten who it was, a former director of the CIA perhaps earlier today, who said he couldn't believe that a state would actually support Jim Woolsey, former director of the CIA, who said directly he couldn't believe that a state would actively support an act such as this, though it may have over periods of time, as Iran and Iraq and Syria and Afghanistan have all been suspected to do, give collateral or indirect support down through the years.
The word that the President used was so expansive, Peter. It wasn't just supported or funded. It was any who harbored them, who may have given them sanctuary at any time. That is a very open-ended commitment.
And then I thought, by the way, also, if I may add, that this President particularly, who feels so strongly about his Christianity, felt it a good time to...
And the slanted floors that had just collapsed under their own pressure, and it appears that these rescue workers are a long way from not only containing the blaze, but recovering the victims. Tom?
I find that stunning, Jim Miklashevsky, that they've had all day to work on that blaze. It tells you about the very grievous nature of this attack on that building, that they still have flames at this hour burning through the military headquarters of the United States.
Well, actually, Tom, you know, some consider the location where this plane went in rather fortunate, because exactly where the plane went in was an area that had recently been redeveloped and redesigned with very heavy blast walls and fire walls in that new area there. Of course, can't withstand the kind of impact of a 757. So as you look at the building, the fire did not spread very much to the right, the new portion of the building, and the old portion where the fire continues to spread, much of that had already been vacated, those offices vacated in preparations of the remodeling effort that was to be undertaken in that section of the building. Even though the death toll here is likely to still rise significantly, the number of dead is probably considerably less than it would have been if this part of the Pentagon had been up to full staff. Tom?
And Jim, a lot of people are going to be looking at all that destruction and wonder whether our military capability is in any way compromised by the damage to the building here.
Well, fortunately, too, this is exactly the opposite side of all the critical command centers in the Pentagon. The Secretary of Defense's office, the Chairman of the Joint Chiefs office, the National Military Command, the tank, you've been there, Tom, where some of the most critical military decisions are made. Fortunately, they were all on the other side of the building, and Secretary Rumsfeld never left the building today. After surveying some of the damage, actually helping some of the injured out on stretchers, he returned, not to his office, but the National Military Command Center to coordinate any kind of military assessments and operations that may be underway. Tom, one indication that some plans are already being considered Two aircraft carriers were recently in the Persian Gulf, the Enterprise, the Carl Vinson. The Enterprise had left the Persian Gulf, was scheduled to leave the area, head home, and the Navy has told, the Pentagon has told the Enterprise, stay right where you are.
Jim, we do know that the Air Force One had a fighter plane escort when it returned today from the Omaha to Washington leg. Do you think that that might be routine for the foreseeable future?
I would guess that probably will be routine. I mean, we saw the extraordinary scene over here earlier today of American fighter jets, F-16, flying low-level cover over the Capitol and the Pentagon. And I think there will be extraordinary security measures, not only implemented around this building, and they have been stiffened just recently, Tom. All the outside windows have been equipped with Kevlar coating to guard against blast. This portion of the building that have been remodeled, heavy blast walls put in. So they were in the process of trying to make this building terror-proof. It was proven today that that may never be possible.
All right, thank you very much, NBC's Jim Miklaszewski, who is at the Pentagon tonight. Now let's go to NBC's Andrea Mitchell, who covers the diplomatic front and national security matters for us as well. Colin Powell, is he back in the nation's capital tonight, Andrea?
Yes, he is back. He had cut short his trip to South America, flew directly from Lima, Peru, back to Washington, and is now at the State Department. He went to meetings with his top team. They were waiting there on the 7th floor of the State Department for him, so he came back without going to Bogota, Colombia. But intelligence officials and others are all, as you know, mobilizing to try to find the culprits. U.S. officials have briefed some members of Congress. What we're learning now from Senator Orrin Hatch, who is a key member of the Judiciary Committee, is that they did have intelligence intercepts. So after the attack, they did pick up some intercepts, and you know the sophistication of the National Security Agency and their ability to intercept communications worldwide, and they zero in, they target bin Laden's operation routinely. They picked up intercepts with some members of his organization apparently referring to these targets having been hit. They've been successful in the past building cases against bin Laden by picking up this kind of information, these kinds of communications. They also believe that at least one person on one of the 4 doomed flights may have been a member of his organization. So as disastrous as this is, they will have leads from people checking into airports, checking on those flights. They know some of the pseudonyms, the aliases, the fake identifications that are used by some of these people. They've probably got a pretty good head start tonight. George Tenet and his officials are all gathered at the CIA in secure areas and are having meetings as we speak.
Andrea Mitchell, are you picking up anything about sending emissaries around the world in an effort to build what has been described as an extraordinary coalition of people to try to build an alliance against the idea of terrorism? Because it's not just the Western democracies that are being threatened by all of this, but as you well know, many of the moderate Arab states have been targets as well.
And as Dick Holbrooke and General Schwarzkopf were talking to you earlier, it's very clear that we are at a very weak moment diplomatically in the Arab world and in the Gulf region. Our best allies, including Saudi Arabia, top leaders have been blunt in telling President Bush and communicating privately with his father, who is of course very popular in that area, and talking to other U.S. officials about how displeased they are about the situation with the U.S., Israel, and the Palestinians. So there is very little support. Bin Laden is a hero, is in many ways an idol to many people on the street in the Palestinian areas. So while we have
low, and the entire building sinks in a straight vertical, the floors falling faster and faster down, until you notice that every floor in the building is gone. Viewed from another angle, you can see the same thing. Notice the aerial stays vertical, just stays straight as it sinks into the building. There's no buckling or tipping, just straight down. And this happened in both buildings. The first tower, too, stayed straight as it went down, each floor falling neatly on top of the other. So the reason the towers went so quickly is because all the floors were literally hanging onto the skin. And once the skin went, the buildings went too. Robert Krulwich, ABC News.
Well, that report, as we look at New York City at night, which has a still quality about it tonight. It's a city of light at night, as so many American cities are, but there's a still, almost calm look of it from the sky. It's anything but that on the ground. But this is the second time from Robert Krowich and also from some architect engineers we talked to a little earlier that say it was the heat which caused the building to collapse, because that the steel at the top of the building would maybe have only been able to sustain an hour and a half of intense fire, and then the steel begins, as Robert points out, so clearly collapse upon itself all the way down to the bottom. I think we have with us on the phone or in person from Seattle, John Magnuson, who is an engineer. John, are you there? John Magnuson, who is with the company that actually built the World Trade Center towers. John, have you heard our two layman explanations tonight of what it was we think collapsed the building, and do you agree or disagree?
I agree. I need to say one thing. At the time of the design of the World Trade Center, that was in the mid-1960s, and I was in 6th grade. So to kind of put in perspective how much time has passed since this design was actually completed. But the description of the fact that steel, when it gets up to 1,500, 1,600 degrees Fahrenheit, that it loses its strength is accurate. The buildings actually survived the impact of both the planes, and it was really the fire that finally created the disaster.
And the upper floor fell on the next floor down, which fell on the next floor, and the sheer accumulation of weight just forced the whole building to collapse on itself.
Right there, from the videotape, and I can only go from what I've seen on television, but the videotape showed that several of the upper floors fell onto the next lower floor that was still intact. And once that happens, there's going to be an instant overload situation, and then it will fail. And then that will drop down to the next floor into another instant overload situation. And so the floors just progressively collapse down all the way to the bottom.
I appreciate very much the fact that you were very young in the mid-1960s when the trade towers were built. Though I've heard it said earlier today that they in fact, were stronger, more sensible structures than many of the more daring shaped buildings that are being built in parts of the world today.
Right. The term that structural engineers use is redundancy. And the World Trade Center towers really set a new standard in redundancy. And that's why those airplanes were able to crash into the towers without causing the structural failure. The buildings were still standing. And then the problem was the fire and the jet fuel. And in normal buildings, all the steel is protected with fireproofing, and there's sprinkler systems, but they're not designed to protect against a jet fuel fire inside of a building.
Can you be a little more precise what you mean by redundancy?
Redundancy is that if you have a structural element that is damaged and is no longer able to carry the load, that load is able to be passed on to other elements or other columns or other beams within the building. And the columns on the World Trade Center, they were spaced at 39 inches on center all the way across each face.
What does that mean, 39 inches at center?
Every 3 feet 3 inches there was a column that supported the building. So they were very closely spaced together. Many buildings, the columns are 10 or 15 feet apart or more. And so having these very close spaced columns on the outside created a lot of redundancy. That's why there was able to be a hole in the side. If you go back and look at the tapes, there was a tremendous hole in the side of the building, and it didn't collapse until the fire brought it down.
And Trade Tower number 7, which was the last to go, which was a building 47 stories high, do you have any sense of why it ultimately collapsed? Was it the concussion of the other buildings collapsing which undermined it?
I'm not familiar with that building. We were not involved in that building, and I haven't seen any of the details on that yet.
So aside from your horror, which I assume you share with the rest of us today, when you look at what has happened today, do you learn something?
Well, it's a very difficult situation because if you take that much of a load and that much jet fuel and you put it into a building, there's very little that you can do. And really, I think the solution to this will be to keep the planes and keep these attacks away from the doorsteps of these buildings.
John Nance, who's our aviation analyst, said to us several hours ago when speculating, as we all are in many cases, about who may have been involved, said he would not be surprised if somewhere in the world there was a structural engineer who was part of this operation. Does that make sense to you?
It makes sense. I sure would hope not. Every structural engineer is dedicated to preserving public safety. And just the thought that that someone would take that training and use it for evil purposes just really disgusts me.
Is there anything I've missed, John? No? Okay. I'm very grateful for the time. What's it like up there in Seattle tonight? People feeling exactly the same thing people here in New York City are feeling?
Yes, and there was certainly a lot of apprehension during the day. Many of the buildings were evacuated just as precautionary measures. But there's this same empty feeling in your stomach about the whole thing, and just watching. People, of course, were glued to the coverage on the television sets.
Well, thank you for being so articulate about it and helping us understand, at least from the, thank you very much, from the slightly cold-blooded language of engineers and journalists covering this from some distance today, the structure of the building, which may not have been able to stand up to that fire, which was caused when those two planes, the first and the second, struck under somebody's control fairly high up in these superstructures, and then simply, as Robert Krulwich pointed out, and John Magnuson confirms, collapsed down upon themselves. And it was the president, we think. George Stephanopoulos is still with me. You were down there all today. It was the president, we think, who gave some clue to that which we have feared most of the day, that it wasn't hundreds of people involved in this, but thousands.
But thousands, yes. But Peter, I think, and I was thinking of this as John Magnuson was talking, when you talk about the strength of the building, in the coming days, we're also going to be hearing about some amazing, not only rescue stories, but survival stories. I spoke with the relative of someone who was on the 102nd floor of the first building today. After it took the hit from the airplane, that person still made it down from the 102nd floor and is home safe tonight.
It's very interesting because one of the lawyers had come down from a lower floor, believed that many people had got down in a fairly orderly fashion from some of the highest floors, at certainly right underneath where the attack had occurred, which has given people here, and I suspect in the country, some hope tonight that many more people got out of this building than we thought. It is now 9 o'clock Eastern Time. In the East, it is now 6 o'clock. On the West Coast, up and down the West Coast in the United States, it is about 12 hours, just 12 hours and a bit since many of us walking to work were suddenly confronted with having to deal with this in one way or another. And there's a huge number of developments to catch up with. I want to go first of all, as we just review this, because this all happened in the morning of Good Morning, right in the middle of Good Morning, at the very end of Good Morning America. Charles Gibson, Charlie Gibson, and Diane Sawyer were there on television live when this happened, and so it seems appropriate that we go to Diane, and Diane, ask you to put together some reconstruction of it for us.
Traffic helicopters were the first to report an explosion in the North Tower of the World Trade Center. Witnesses say they saw it, a plane crashing into the building.
I saw something push the building in, and then I saw the tail, and then I saw flame.
Everybody else, let's go!
Evacuation begins inside the building. Then, a few minutes later, just after 9 a.m., as smoke pours from the top of the North Tower, an unbelievable sight, a second plane hitting the South Tower.
Oh my God! Oh, jeez! Oh my God!
There are gaping holes in flames coming now from both towers. Witnesses see people screaming from the higher floors.
They're trying to save themselves. I don't know.
I see people jumping from the top of the World Trade Center. And
this is as close as we can get to the base of the World Trade Center. You can see the fire.
It was about 10 o'clock a.m. when the South Tower collapsed.
A huge explosion now raining debris on all of us. We better get out of the way.
On the ground, there's chaos. Flaming debris, someone said, like the dark side of the moon.
It was bad. It was like a dust storm or something. Like I couldn't see anything.
About 20 minutes later, the second tower crumbles to the ground.
Oh my God, there it goes!
Symbols of New York, the World Trade Center towers, are simply gone.
Diane Sawyer giving us what it was like, at least from a distance, because we've all been at a distance from this, what it was like in those first moments. Now let's look at it from another perspective, because ABC's Lisa Stark, who covers aviation for us, as we've said several times today, is able, I think, to take you there, Lisa?
I am, Peter.
Lisa's in Seattle today, where she's been out at the Boeing company. It was Boeing jets, Boeing equipment, 757s and 767s involved. Why don't you just walk us through what you and we now know about how this unfolded from the point of view of the hijackers?
All right, I will, but Peter, I want to give you a little bit of new information first, if I may. There's a meeting going on, we understand, between the Federal Aviation Administration and the major carriers at this point. They are trying to determine how they might be able to get air service back up and going again tomorrow, what steps would need to be taken. We do understand from a number of sources that one of the things they are considering is a resumption of the Air Marshal program. That would be armed air marshals that would actually fly on a number of flights. Now, that happens now in the United States, but it's a very small percentage of flights. It's unclear whether they would ramp up to every flight. That seems unlikely, but whether they are considering whether they would put air marshals on a number of flights as a precaution throughout the United States. One of the options that they are talking about.
Okay, just before you go to your chronology then, let
Yes.
me remind people that what you mean by air service back up is because hundreds of airplanes and thousands of passengers, an extraordinary job of air traffic control and pilots getting planes safely on the ground when the FAA decided everybody should land at the nearest possible airport, many of which are in Canada. And so there are thousands of people stranded far away from home tonight, safe, but when you refer to air service being got back up again, you basically mean getting the nation's air communication systems back up and running.
Absolutely. There's a national ground stop throughout the United States until at least noon tomorrow. It's going to be a massive task to get the system up and running, and obviously the main concern is to do it safely, to make sure that we don't have a repeat of the horrible events that we saw today. So there are security issues that are paramount, and there are also simply operational issues. How do you sort of turn the switch back on and get as many as 40,000 flights every day in the United States back in the air? And those discussions about that are underway right now, we understand.
We'll all follow that one. Now take us, if you would, through the movement of the aircraft which were ultimately and fatally involved.
What we know is that American Airlines Flight 11 was the first plane involved. That was the plane, a 767, en route from Boston's Logan Airport to Los Angeles. The plane took off shortly after 8 o'clock, we understand. About a half hour into the flight, it made a sharp left turn down towards New York. There were massive changes in airspeed apparently at that time. As the plane then headed toward Manhattan, it slowed and slammed into the World Trade Tower. It had been in the air about 45 minutes. Now, at the same time this was going on, there was a United Airlines 767, Flight 175, also from Boston to Los Angeles. It also was in the air, taken over by hijackers. That plane made a turn towards New Jersey, then made virtually a U-turn and came up toward the Trade Tower from the south, came over Staten Island. It slammed into the second Trade Tower. It had also been in the air about 45 minutes. Now, before any of these planes actually hit the World Trade Center, a third plane, a United Airlines 757, American Airlines American Airlines 757, it was Flight 77 from Dulles, had taken off. It was bound for Los Angeles as well. We don't know much about the flight path of that plane. We believe it was in the air about 1 hour before it hit the Pentagon. Then we have the fourth plane, United Flight 93, another 757 en route from Newark to San Francisco. We are unclear about the departure time. We have some conflicting information about that, whether it was close to 8 o'clock or closer to 8:45. It did depart Newark Airport. It appears that hijackers may have taken control of the plane over Cleveland. That is when it suddenly made a turn back toward the east. We also understand that sometime at that point, someone from the cockpit called the FAA and requested a change in flight plan. They said, we're not going to San Francisco. We want to go to Washington, D.C., to DCA, which is National Airport. It's unclear whether there was another Washington target, perhaps, that this plane was aiming for. Either way, it didn't make it all the way to Washington. It crashed in Pennsylvania. A total of 266 passengers and crew on all 4 of these planes. The toll could have been even much, much worse on the jetliners because they were very lightly filled. They can hold anywhere from 185 to 250 people. The most crowded plane had 90 passengers and crew members on it. Peter, we also want to mention, if we can, that as this was unfolding, people on board these planes were able to communicate what was going on. We know some details about that. We know on Flight 11, that was the American Airlines flight, the first one that hit the World Trade Tower, a flight attendant was able to call the American Airlines Operations Center. The flight attendant informed them that a number of flight attendants had been stabbed and that the perpetrators had stormed the cockpit. She was also able to tell them, apparently, the seat number of at least one of the hijackers. She was able to give them that information. We also know that there were some cell phone calls from at least 2 of the other planes. There was a cell phone call, as you have reported earlier, from the plane that slammed into the Pentagon, a woman calling her husband, saying that these hijackers were on board, that they had box cutters, those sorts of knives, and they had herded all of the passengers into the back of the plane. And we understand there was also a cell phone call on the United 175 flight. That was the other flight that hit the World Trade Tower. Apparently, a son on that plane called his father from his cell phone and also said there were hijackers on board with knives. So we do know that as the events were unfolding, what was going on 30,000 feet above the United States was being communicated. Of course, unfortunately, there was nothing the people on the ground could do about any of this except watch in horror as these planes ended up where they ended up.
Well, thanks very much, Lisa Stark, who has given a very clear picture many times today on what precisely happened, or at least as much as we know of what happened. Thank you. On board those planes, we do not very often make recommendations for people's behavior from this chair, but as Lisa was talking, I checked in with my children, and who are deeply distressed, as I think young people are across the United States. And so if you're a parent, you got a kid in some other part of the country, call them up, exchange observations. People have been getting onto sites on the web, which is a very good, vigorous way for people, very good way for people to communicate. Some of the things people have been telling us at ABC News, at abcnews.com, after today, nothing changes. Sorry, everything changes. Nothing will ever be the same. The way you've lived your life, enjoyed your freedom, your very personal expression, it all changes after today. From someone else, only a month ago, I laid on a bench outside the World Trade Center and marveled at what man could create, looking up at those 110 stories, and now I stare in disbelief at what man can take away. I want retribution, said one person to abcnews.com, and that's a sentiment that has been widely, deeply expressed in the heart of the political establishment in Washington and by people in every walk of life across the country. And as George Stephanopoulos and Leon Panetta, the former White House Chief of Staff, have made very clear, and as the President clearly knows already, one of the things the President has to do is be patient and understand who it is who did this before the country can do anything by way of retaliation. Here's a slightly chilling one. If they can pull off an act like this, they are certainly capable of eventually sending nuclear weapons this way. And this is very interesting. How can people keep calling it the modern Pearl Harbor? At least we knew who we were up against back then. Of course, the attack on Pearl Harbor by the Japanese was a surprise to a great many Americans in the middle of afternoon ball games. This is the first time today that Major League Baseball has ever canceled all its games since D-Day, the invasion of Normandy in World War II. And one of the enormously frustrating things for the intelligence establishment, for the political establishment, for all of us in the country today, not to mention anyone else in the world who was a friend of the United States, perhaps even a foe, is to understand who it was who actually did this. And the reverberations from this are indeed global. Air traffic, we already know, listening to Lisa Stark and our own reporting earlier today, is snarled around the world, especially in Europe. The impact of what happens there in terms of transportation and commerce. The stock
airliner was on its way. Most of the building's 23,000 workers fled.
Plane's coming in. Come on. Let's go. Let's go. Come on. We're not playing around here. Let's go.
F-16 fighters circled overhead looking for a second attack. but the damage had already been done. The plane had drilled a hole about a third of the way through the world's largest office building. The wounded were rushed to nearby hospitals as the fire spread and an entire section of the building collapsed, trapping many, many more inside.
Arlington search and rescue personnel are just now, and it's about almost 2 o'clock, just now gaining access to portions of the building where the plane hit because the fires were too intense.
One ray of hope. The Pentagon is undergoing a major renovation and some of the offices in the path of the plane were vacant.
We're trying to find out who made it out okay and account for the people that may not have made it out.
When the plane hit, Defense Secretary Rumsfeld moved from his office on the other side of the building into the National Military Command Center in the basement. With smoke hanging in the air, he ordered aircraft carriers, amphibious ships, cruisers, and destroyers to New York and Washington, where they can serve as floating hospitals, help with the cleanup, and provide air defense against the possibility of more attacks. And the chairman of the Joint Chiefs made a clear threat of military retaliation.
I have no intentions of discussing today what comes next, but make no mistake about it, your armed forces are ready.
Right now, suspicion focuses on Osama bin Laden, but first things first. The FBI is combing the wreckage for evidence, and all U.S. military bases and embassies are at the highest state of alert. Dan?
David Martin reporting again live from the Pentagon. President Bush today
provided one insight when he said that the hijackers of one of the aircraft had apparently sneaked knives through airport security.
American Airlines Flight 11 departed Boston for Los Angeles, hijacked by suspects armed with knives. This plane crashed into the World Trade Center.
Within minutes of today's attacks, officials were pointing to the 1993 bombing of the World Trade Center by a group with ties to bin Laden, citing it as proof that bin Laden has never given up on his dream to destroy the symbol of America's economic power. And in recent months, analysts say bin Laden has only become more and more sophisticated in his attempts to strike at the United States. They point specifically to his simultaneous attack on 2 U.S. embassies in East Africa.
They also went directly against a U.S. destroyer, which was heavily guarded, and they did put a hole in that ship, the USS Cole. So they have a track record of conducting attacks that one would think they might not be capable of.
Late today, the U.S. intelligence community was rapidly sorting through a priority list of potential suspects within the U.S. for electronic eavesdropping, with sources saying the number may reach into the hundreds. Some of the very doomed passengers themselves may have provided authorities with their first valuable tips. In panic desperation, some of the passengers, including, we're told, the wife of U.S. Solicitor General Ted Olson, called from a cell phone to say their plane had been hijacked. Another passenger called from the restroom at the rear of another aircraft. One passenger, it has been suggested, provided detailed information about one of the hijackers. The working theory by lawmen so far is that the hijackers were pilots themselves and forcefully took over the controls to dive their jets straight into the targets. Dan?
Jim Stewart, live in our Washington Bureau. Join us now again for perspective and context on this. Former U.S. National Security Advisor Sandy Berger, who was in fact the National Security Advisor for 8 years straight through.
Some of the horror of this day and what happened at the World Trade Center.
The mighty World Trade Center tumbling down.
No! Oh my God!
Everyday New Yorkers had to run for their lives. How fragile the city seemed today. We deployed a team of Dateline staffers to bring us images of a city under siege on handheld digital cameras.
What I saw today on the streets of Manhattan really were the extremes of New York. It's the best and the worst of people.
I got 20 blocks away when the smell and the taste really hit me. Way in the distance, the huge cloud on the horizon, but I could taste and smell something that was like the worst electrical fire ever imaginable.
They brought us a startling glimpse of what it was like to be at ground zero of a major terrorist attack.
What's it like down there?
Saved 6 people. I tried my best to try to save everybody.
First, get away, then get home. Businesses were closed and buildings evacuated. Thousands upon thousands were left to negotiate a maze of closed streets and suspended services.
Disappeared and everybody stopped running. And I didn't know if my dad is going to have a father, if I have my husband anymore.
There was a real sense of panic on the streets among the tens of thousands of pedestrians, and it was easy to see why. Look to the horizon on the south and you see an enormous gray-black cloud from the explosion.
As they moved towards safety uptown, people tried to keep up with the flurry of events any way they could. Even the wounded walked. This woman was on the 19th floor of the World Trade Center when the first explosion hit. Hurt, but lucky to get out before the building collapsed. We found her 30 blocks north, heading to Bellevue Medical Center.
A huge cloud of gray, huge cloud of gray came and everyone started running and stampeding and everyone was falling on the ground. And I don't know what knocked me over. I don't know if it was a person or just the force of the wind. But I fell down, I just covered my head. I prayed that a building wouldn't fall on me and I really thought I was going to die.
Doctors and medical students lined up like extras on the set of a disaster movie. Almost immediately after the attack, along with all three major airports, the city's subways, bridges, tunnels, and major highways were all closed. The FDR Drive, normally a winding snarl of congested traffic, empty. Thousands of commuters from New York's outer boroughs were left stranded in Manhattan. By mid-afternoon, a police officer on the scene estimated that more than 20,000 people had crossed the 59th Street Bridge on foot. Meanwhile, Grand Central Station was jammed, but the trains were running until noon.
I remember standing in Grand Central and watching a man and a woman just scream and embrace each other and feel relief. I felt their relief to see each other again. After people had been managing to get out for about 15 minutes, all of a sudden they announced that they were evacuating the building, and people were ordered to get out immediately, and workers in their orange vests were running for the exits, and we didn't know what was going on. We just ran with them.
Confused passengers poured out of the building after a bomb threat.
It hit me that this building really could blow up, and I was scared. I was afraid that the building literally could blow up underneath my feet.
All around the city, it was a mass migration of hundreds of thousands of people, but uncannily quiet. Perhaps it was the unspeakable horrors many had seen.
It was orderly, but it was chaotic. People were shocked. Everyone was dazed. People didn't really want to look each other in the eye, I think, for fear of breaking down. The question on everybody's lips seemed to be, what is going on, and is there more of it that's going to come?
This was supposed to be Election Day in New York. As if anyone took note, it was officially called off. Everything was. What was open was tightly locked down.
What's that? Can't be doing no pictures. Okay, it's NBC News. Don't you understand? It's NBC News. I don't care who it is.
Security at all buildings that might be targets was extremely tight. Our own building, the famous tourist destination at Rockefeller Plaza, was evacuated, but for NBC's news operations to bring you this story. And all over Manhattan, there was this strange sort of gridlock.
The uptown avenues in Manhattan have been turned into virtual parking lots as everyone tries to flee northward. Meanwhile, the downtown avenues have all been sealed off but for emergency vehicles.
Cell phone service came and went. Anxious people called their loved ones the old-fashioned way. Sometimes that didn't work either.
People were forced to use payphones, which is kind of a joke in Manhattan because it's hard to find a payphone that works.
The only thing that was easy today was getting lost in the scramble.
She doesn't have a cell phone. They don't work anyway. She is not mobile because she's got emphysema and she can't walk very fast.
David Douglas's 64-year-old mother lives in an apartment building just 4 blocks from the World Trade Center. Soon after the attack, she had chest pains. So he flagged a passing car and the driver headed for the nearest hospital.
But I said, look, lady, please, my mom can't walk. Please, please just take her north as much as you can, because she can't breathe well.
He tried to follow on his rollerblades, but lost track of the car and spent the rest of the day searching hospitals.
So I just want to know, is there any system of finding people with...
Well, they're doing the best. We're doing the best we can. It's pretty chaotic.
He searched family reunion centers.
Lucille Abato.
Spelled for me.
A-B-A-T-O.
And even public schools, desperate to find his mother.
Are there any people being kept here?
Finally, after 4 hours of futile searching, he called home. There was a message on his answering machine.
It's my mom.
She was safe, staying with a friend in his very own apartment building.
She's in my building.
For two New Yorkers, a small moment of comfort in a day when so many others will find none.
Not just me and you, but all these...
We could all use a little good news, and that is so typical of New York. It's the tough guy city in terms of reputation, but of course it's got a tender heart. Chris Colvin, one of my colleagues, told me tonight that there are reports as well of very long lines outside all the blood banks in the city, because the line has gone out that they do need blood, and in fact they've turned them away in some instances. And I had here a moment ago, let me find it, there's been a call that has gone out for medical personnel, particularly for physicians. Doctors in and near New York City, contact 518-431.
Road that goes between the towns of Lambertsville and Shanksville in Pennsylvania. And beyond all of these lights you see, the glare of the media satellite trucks, it is a very dark night here in the country, but it is very busy. About a half a mile to a mile or so beyond, just over my shoulder, sort of where you see all those trucks headed down in an open field of an old strip mine, is where lies the wreckage of United Flight 93, which of course, as you all have been reporting, took off from Newark, destined for San Francisco, never got there. 38 passengers, 7 crew, no survivors. The debris here is spread over a 3 to 4 mile radius, which has now been completely sealed off and is being treated, according to the FBI, as a crime scene. Governor Tom Ridge made some remarks earlier at a press conference. He had flown over the site. He said the emergency response here was immediate. He also said, and I don't know whether or not you all are able to see pictures of this, but this is one of those cases where the pictures really do tell the story, that sort of the most horrifying aspect of this particular crash scene is how little debris is visible. There is a large crater in the ground, and I'm hoping that you all are seeing it as I'm talking about it. But that's really all you see, is a large crater in the ground and just tiny, tiny bits of debris. There has been at least one report that the investigators out there, and there are hundreds of them, as I said tonight, have found nothing larger than a phone book. You spoke a little bit ago, Tom, about the haunting cell phone conversations. The most tantalizing story to emerge from this particular crash is coming not from here, but from elsewhere, and it is a story of a cell phone conversation. A passenger on United Flight 93 apparently locked himself in a bathroom and called 911 and got an emergency dispatch operator and told them the plane had been hijacked. The FBI here is not talking about it at all. They were merely say they are aware of that conversation and they are trying to gather evidence about it, which presumably means that there may well be a tape and somebody hopefully is listening to it. What else is happening here tonight? Forensic archaeologists, according to the FBI, are gridding out the scene. Their main thrust, of course, is...
Although they tell me they're going to really wait for daylight to do much more. Then we went over to Building 7, which also burned and burned later in the afternoon. And over there, you're hearing the crumbling sounds. It almost sounds as if you're going to have a rock fall or a landslide or an avalanche, because the building is creaking and moaning as it continues to crumple. Now, there was still fire. I couldn't determine exactly where it was. I didn't know if it's that Marriott hotel or not. We saw flames still going up in the air, but it was impossible to determine from where we were exactly what that fire is right now. And Don Daler fanned out in a different direction. I'm going to bring him in once again to see what you saw, Don.
Well, I just a moment ago saw a doctor in full medical scrubs walking from the direction of the scene, and I asked him, was there anybody that he even got to work on down there? And he said no, that they didn't have any victims or injured people who were coming out to the triage area. So either the people who were injured have been brought out and are already at the hospitals, or there's nobody coming out right now. And that just now happened.
You think you saw a K-9 unit deploying as well?
We heard, we saw a K-9 unit, and we heard reports that there were some Metro workers trapped somewhere down in that area. And also there was a 911 cell phone call, a report of a 911 cell phone call from a Philadelphia area code that was traced to the region, to the area down near the Marriott Hotel. But we are, in the next couple days and hours, certainly we're going to hear probably as many tragic stories as you saw leaves of paper. But one of them was a fireman who just came by moments ago, did not want to go on camera. He was down there very early in the day and had actually witnessed one of his fellow firemen killed by a falling body, by someone who had jumped from the building.
Unending tragedy. The firefighters working down there now, the grit in your eyes makes it almost impossible to see. The soot is absolutely everywhere still. And we talked to you before, Peter, about the fact that all of these documents, I cannot tell you what it is like to see this sea of financial documents every place. And I just picked up randomly a couple of them, and they're analysis of someone's budget, and then there's an analysis of an insurance filing, and you just keep thinking how important all of these seemed to someone 24 hours ago.
Well, Diane, thank you very much indeed for your work today. It goes without saying we value enormously. As you were talking, I was also trying to catch up to the ripple effect of this thing. We know that aircraft are grounded. Lisa Stark told us a short while ago that aviation authorities and various other governmental authorities are discussing whether or not this freeze on air travel in the country is going to last as long as the original 12-hour delay they put in it, because among other things, Postal Service officials are now saying that mail is only going to be delivered within 600 miles of its point of origin for at least the next 24 hours, because mail going beyond 600 miles goes by a commercial carrier, and that's surely one of the things the government is talking about at the moment in terms of the interruption of national and, one could argue, international life at the moment. ABC's Betsy Stark, who covers the stock market, national business affairs, and international business affairs, is with us at the moment. Betsy, put together for us, if you will, the picture of a world.
And as well, the back office, the keeping track of all of the processing that goes on. That a lot of firms had in the World Trade Center, other firms that were even headquartered there also. Questions about all of those kind of things. Certainly they pale in comparison to the human tragedy here, but they will be things that have to be dealt with in the days and weeks ahead.
Thank you, David Faber of CNBC, and Ron Insana, our colleague, as well. And that was very well put at the end. The economy at some point will come back. Money can be replaced. The human loss today, however, and we still do not know the full proportions of that human loss. That's a tragedy that will be with us for some time. The New York City Firefighters Union still saying that at least 200 members of that union, 200 of New York's finest who were down there on emergency and rescue details right after the initial planes went into the World Trade Center, they are missing and presumed to be dead tonight. We do not know how many people are still trapped in the rubble of those two 110-story buildings that came down, nor do we know the exact death toll, for that matter, in the Pentagon, where the fires continue to burn. I just want to repeat, in New York City, for those of you who are listening to us here or in New Jersey, please contact 518-431-7600 if you can offer assistance. This is the Healthcare Association of New York State, a trade group which has volunteered to forward this information to emergency officials. The number rings and rings, but it will go through. The information that they collect is given to the city's Department of Health. That 1-800 number.
Some retaliation should be done, but that's what we have the laws for and everything like that. Making the place a sandbox, I don't think we should do that, but you know, we got to look at other things. The people are the ones that are suffering, everybody, and not ready to attack everybody. We should find out what's going on first. As I said, I have a family member there, and I would like to see something happen, but I don't agree with everything. But I think Mickey hit the nail on the head just now.
Shane, thanks for the call. I want you to know that the local authorities have announced that the federal building here in downtown Rochester, the Keating building, will be open on Wednesday morning. It will be open with heightened security, though. That will mean perhaps a little more time getting in and out of the building, so be aware of that. A local Red Cross volunteer is now in New York City to help with the of people not only in awe at today's terrorist attack, but mostly just trying to get through one of our nation's most horrific moments.
First tower where the first plane hit at about 8:45.
They announced that all airports in the country are being closed.
All flights were grounded in Rochester and across the U.S. following the attacks, which left stranded travelers here shaking their heads.
It's awful. It's scary. Very scary.
Words can't begin to describe it.
I can just tell you briefly, we have shut down.
At a loss for words.
See this extraordinary plume of smoke.
Those stuck at the airport watched TV as news of the attacks filtered in. Many on planes headed elsewhere were diverted to Rochester.
We were sitting in first class and everybody just went numb. One guy bent down, I thought he was crying.
Like the rest of the country, we were shocked by what was taking place.
Officials at the Greater Rochester Airport stepped up security following the attacks. Tired travelers wondered when they might go home and how something like this could happen.
I've read books where this stuff happened. You know, we all have, but to actually face it, no, I don't know what to think. I'm panic-stricken. I'd like to get back to my kids. Rochester's a long way from home.
Seth Voorhees, our News.
Monopolis's microphone. Governor Pataki, the governor of New York, we've seen him a couple of times today, briefing in the first instance by himself and then with the mayor of New York, Rudy Giuliani. And I am grateful, sir, as I'm sure the audience is, that you take time from pressing events at the least to come in and tell us what's going on.
Well, Peter, we're doing everything we can.
You know John Miller, by the way.
Yes, of course I know John. We're doing everything we can to try to make sure that we rescue as many people as possible, provide the services to those who have been injured, make sure we have the medical support staff and the emergency teams in place, and I
apologize, I'm going to interrupt you several times.
Sure.
Are you rescuing people at the moment? Because we're not certain.
We have the equipment down in Lower Manhattan right now. The city has its police and fire emergency services down there, and we've augmented it with our National Guard heavy equipment that is down there right now. I cannot say that anybody has been rescued, that anybody has been uncovered, but because the first step is to put out the fires and to make sure that the rescue workers are safe, but that's the goal.
There's some reports of people using their cell phones. In fact, John remarked on this earlier, people using their cell phones from under the rubble to communicate their location. Have you been able to get to people in those situations?
I can't say that anybody's been able we've been able to get to anybody, but I do know that every step that can be taken is being taken.
Okay, so go on with what have you been doing this afternoon and this evening?
Well, I wanted to make sure that we had the support team, and we've been working with Mayor Giuliani to augment the city's services. I also spoke with the president and the vice president, and we were getting security briefings on a regular basis. And Peter, I got to tell you that the outpouring of support from around the surrounding area, from around the country and around the world has been enormous. You know, this is a very dark day in American history, but we're going to get through it. The people's resolve is strong, the spirit is strong, and we will not allow our freedom to be taken from us.
I know you said yourself you've talked to President Bush and to Vice President Cheney. We had the impression that for a while there today, Mr. Cheney was the only person left in the White House.
No, I spoke with the president early, probably 9:20, 9:30 this morning, and he's been extremely responsive. All the help we've needed from the federal government we've gotten.
Do you need anything more? The Attorney General said that they were sending in some different kinds of emergency teams to New York. Does that mean you are in real need at the moment?
Right now, all the needs that we've been told about have been met. But as we go forward, this is not going to be a one-night or a one-day effort. This is going to go on for days and weeks. And the emergency forces that are there are going to need relief. We're going to have to rotate teams in and out. We're going to need specialized teams. And that's why we're very grateful that we have had this support from the federal government, from the surrounding governors, and from everybody pulling together.
John?
We're hearing the first reports of people being rescued at the scene, but you know, there's a couple of ironies here. Your office, the governor's office, used to be in the World Trade Center.
That's right.
At another time not long ago, you would have been there today.
That's right. And we still have a lot of state offices there, and I have a number of friends who were there this morning.
a number of friends who are unaccounted for even now?
Unaccounted for right now.
Which means that, in all likelihood, you probably know people who were killed in this.
We don't want to give up hope at this point. As I said, we're continuing to do everything we can to try to continue the search and rescue operations, and until everything's been done, hope is something you have to have.
Governor, how close have you come to seeing for yourself what it's like?
I've been to the hospitals. I was with, and the spirit is incredible. I was at St. Vincent's with some injured police and firefighters who were in the hospital injured, and they wanted to go back. They wanted to go back down to help their colleagues. And I was at Cabrini when we had lines of people, blocks long, on the street looking to donate blood. So the spirit of the people, the response has been not one of allowing the terrorists to frighten New Yorkers off the streets. It's been one of pulling together, showing that spirit, showing that hope. And, you know, we've seen death and we've seen destruction, but we've also seen hope. And we will get through this.
You travel through the city in pretty organized fashion at the moment. Are a lot of people out in the city tonight?
No, and they shouldn't be. The vast majority of the people are home, and that's where we want them. But we need to have the highways and the streets clear for the emergency services and the emergency vehicles, and they are right now.
Are all of the hospitals in the city able to cope with what's been presented to them? I recall that earlier today you were calling for doctors to volunteer, and you were calling for nurses to volunteer.
We have seen an outpouring of volunteers in the hospitals, and we've seen an outpouring of donations of blood, so that at this point, the hospitals have the supplies, have the staff, have the support to be able to deal with the crisis as it moves forward. But what's going to happen, Peter, is those doctors, those nurses are going to get tired, and we're going to need the relief teams. And we've set up a statewide system to make sure that people don't just come here, but they register, so that as we need them, we can call on them and bring them in waves to help with that process.
You and Mayor Giuliani have both gone out of your way today to say to people that they must be patient, that in time the United States will retaliate, and that's a matter for the federal government. You want to just give us your thoughts on that?
Peter, that's right. This is something where I'm confident that the President and his team and our military have the ability to retaliate and take the appropriate action, and I'm confident they will. You know, we've seen anger on the streets, and there are moments when I feel it myself, but I've also seen hope, and we have to let that anger not overcome our desire to make sure we are still a nation of laws and a nation of justice. So let the federal government deal with the terrorists, let them make the appropriate response, and let's turn our anger to constructive efforts to rebuild and to pull us together.
It's interesting, Governor. I'm not even sure you know this, but we just heard a short while ago that Kmart, its 2,100 stores in the country, are not going to sell guns and ammunition at the moment. They've taken all their guns and their ammunition off the shelves, which suggests that someone else besides yourself understands there's real anger in the community, and these are those unfortunate times when prejudice sometimes tends to boil over.
There is anger, there is prejudice, but we have to put that aside and understand that...
To talk to you in person, we've seen you several times today on the television. I know exactly how busy you are. Thank you, sir. Let's go back to the streets of New York and ABC's Bill Blakemore, who is downtown. All of this, of course, is at the lower part of Manhattan on the western side of the city on the Hudson River, and ABC's Bill Blakemore is there. And John, you've heard the governor say that things are pretty quiet on the street. Is that the way you find it down there? Hang on, Bill. Hang on. Can't hear you just yet. Hang on. My apologies. Give us one of those 1, 2, 3s, if you wouldn't mind.
1, 2, 3.
Thank you very much. Now I hear you. Go ahead.
Can you hear me, Peter, now?
I can, Bill. Go ahead.
It's very eerie down here in the financial district, Peter. We're just slightly north of the wreckage. The electricity is out everywhere, so we're only able to see things by the very harsh floodlights that have been brought in a few places. There's still smoke billowing out of the wreckage and out of 1 or 2 buildings right next to it. We understand the Marriott Hotel is still on fire. They're pouring water on where they can. But within the past hour, firefighters have told members of our ABC News team that it's clearly going to be morning before they can begin to move any of these hundreds of volunteers, firemen, other rescue workers in to begin to try to make something of it. People who have been right down next to the base of what was the trade towers say there's virtually nothing left, maybe a few flights of stairs, a few stories of one of the buildings, but that when they came down there was so much melting and so much demolishing of any kind of structure that they cannot imagine much being left or much hope of finding anybody alive, though search and rescue is being mounted. We've seen dog teams being brought into position. There are hundreds of firemen just to the west of me here over on the West Side Highway, and dozens of fire trucks and police cars ready to move in. But for the moment, mostly it's just trying to get the temperature down at the base of where the trade towers were and to get the rest of the fire stopped.
And Bill, one knows from past experience that a huge amount of heavy equipment is needed in the area in order to continue the searching operation? Do you see it showing up?
Indeed, we've seen every now and then fleets of bulldozers and other heavy equipment moving through the back streets here. In the dark as it is just now, every now and then a fleet of flashing lights and sirens will go by as the people working on the strategy here are trying to figure out how to get these pieces of equipment into position for what they're going to have to do in the morning. But we can see that it's clearly going to be many days of a great deal of grim work to try to take it apart and to do what they can for anybody that they can find alive. But it's going to be morning before we can really see it.
Thanks very much, Bill Blakemore. One of the things that people who aren't familiar with this part of New York may not fully appreciate is that the trade towers stood, emphasis on stood, very close to the Hudson River. And the West Side Highway, which comes down the west side of New York, past the World Trade Center, and then tucks around and goes up towards, that's Brooklyn, in the map over to the right and across the Brooklyn Bridge and towards the Brooklyn Battery Tunnel. The World Trade Center are very close to the edge of the river, and all that stuff right underneath the World Trade Center at the moment is basically landfill. And so there is a very narrow physical window through which the relief operators can work. Here's the mayor.
Than we need at this point. We're very grateful for it, and it'll be stored in areas, and probably over the next 2 or 3 days we will need it. And we'll do everything we can to support the efforts of the people who are trying to recover people from the debris and the horror that's taken place down there. The number to call if you have questions. I'm not sure we can answer all of your questions, but at least we can try to answer it. Trying to recover as many people as possible and trying to clean up the horrible mess that was created by all of this. And I would ask people to cooperate as much as possible in that effort. If you have to come into Manhattan because your business is essential, then obviously do it. The upper part of Manhattan will be open. But if tomorrow is a day in which you want to stay home and stay with your family and give comfort and support maybe to other people that have been affected by this, it would be a good day to do that. Yep.
Find out that this is going to continue on in the next few days, although certainly not at the rate that we saw it today. And I think from talking to the Dan Abrams talking to the firefighter officials, we were talking about the magnitude of the rescue efforts, huge steel beams. It is the bodies and the victims, the injured, will continue to come in, but at a much lower rate. Tom?
Ask Mr. Ackerman for us quickly, if you could, Robert, whether they have enough medical personnel, doctors and trained nurses and so on.
Mr. Ackerman, are there enough doctors? Do you have the staff you need to deal with whatever contingencies come up?
We do. We had over 500 physicians and nurses on duty, or people that came in from their days off. There was a convention of physicians in town here. As a matter of fact, we had people from Europe come and offer their assistance. And in fact, ultimately, we ended up turning people away because so many wonderful New Yorkers and people from around the world volunteered their services.
And there was also an amazing sight here today. At one point, the hospital had asked for blood, and the number of donors who were spilling onto the street here was so great within just minutes of the first announcement that you had to turn them away.
We did. Actually, we had over 800 people in line at one point. The mayor happened to come at that moment and said, "What do you need?" And we said, "We have people we have to ship to other blood centers." And we had 10 city buses here in a matter of moments. Those 800 people were brought around the city to donate blood in other places.
And you have enough beds to handle all the people that have come in and all the people that will be coming in the next hours?
We do. We have 2,600 beds in the St. Vincent's Catholic Medical Center system, 800 beds here in Manhattan. We were able to send many of our patients to our other hospitals, and they will be ready now with beds here in Manhattan in the event we get many more patients overnight.
Thank you very much, and great job here by many, many doctors and nurses, Tom.
All right, thanks very much, Bob Bazell. At St. Vincent's, one of New York's premier hospitals in lower Manhattan, not too far from the World Trade Center, or what used to be the World Trade Center. You can only imagine what it was like in the nation's capital today. First, the news that the World Trade Center had been hit by a plane, then a second plane had hit the other tower. That, of course, conjured up immediate visions of that this was some kind of a terrorist attack. Then the Pentagon was hit by a hijacked airliner. Donald Rumsfeld, the Secretary of Defense, was in his office at the time. It penetrated 2 of the rings of that fortress-like building. The fires continue to burn there tonight. There was a code red on Capitol Hill. That meant that House Speaker Dennis Hastert, who was third in line of succession, had to be taken to a secure location. Condoleezza Rice, the national security advisor to the president, was on the phone to him. He was at a literacy event in Florida, and she told his staff that they then suspected terrorism as a result of the second attack. She went to the operations room in the White House with Vice President Dick Cheney. Colin Powell turned around on a trip to Lima and started back for the United States. What kind of a day was it for the rest of the day in the nation's capital? Here's NBC's Nora O'Donnell with a report on this day that will be remembered for so long, for so many terrible reasons.
Help me get all these people across the street, please.
Moments after the attack on New York, the chaos spread to the nation's capital.
So it looked to be maybe a 20-passenger corporate jet, no markings on the side, coming in at a shallow angle like it was landing right into the side of the Pentagon. And then a huge fireball, perhaps 5 times the height of the Pentagon.
The terrorist target was the nerve center of the United States military. An explosion ripped through the building that since World War II has symbolized America's power.
And we heard this boom, the building shook, the ceiling tiles fell out of the ceiling, and we ran out. We kind of dazed, grabbed our hard hats, ran out, and there was just smoke. People were screaming, "Run, what is it, what is it?"
Let's roll! Get on the other side!
As firefighters rushed to put out the flames, America learned that the Pentagon had indeed taken a direct hit, not from a corporate jet, but from another hijacked plane, American Airlines Flight 77, en route from Washington's Dulles Airport to Los Angeles. 58 passengers and 6 crew members were aboard. There may have been as many as 100 more people killed or injured inside the building. Dozens were rushed to area hospitals, yet to be accounted for, others that may still be left in the smoldering rubble.
Here in Washington, D.C., we are at threat condition Delta.
Washington, D.C., now in the crosshairs of terrorism. The military was ordered to its highest state of alert. And at the White House, the Secret Service received a credible threat of a terrorist act.
We've got to be off the grounds and inside the building.
A fourth hijacked plane that crashed 80 miles outside Pittsburgh is believed to have been headed for an attack on Camp David, the presidential retreat in the mountains of Maryland. The president wasn't in town, but Vice President Cheney was. He and key aides were whisked out of the West Wing and into a secure location, while other White House staffers were evacuated under the watch of Secret Service agents armed with machine guns.
We've had some reports about intrusions of airspace, which caused us to be concerned enough to recess the House of Representatives subject to the call of the chair.
At the other end of Pennsylvania Avenue at the U.S. Capitol and Supreme Court, lawmakers and justices were forced from the seat of American democracy.
I think, in a sense, it is unfortunately a unique experience in American history.
And I characterize it as a man who lived through World War II, as a young sailor at the end of the war. It's another Pearl Harbor for this country.
By 10 a.m., all federal offices were closed, sending the government's entire workforce into the clogged streets to try to make their way home. For tourists, museums and monuments were shut down as well. Washington was in a frenzy. Hospitals in emergency mode, roads shut down, bridges closed, fighter jets patrolling the skies. The mayor declared a state of emergency.
That all of our emergency agencies are fully deployed to meet any emergencies that might arise.
The Pentagon's functioning. It'll be in business tomorrow.
Later, Donald Rumsfeld, the Secretary of Defense, stepped up to the Pentagon podium to state the horrible truth everyone already knew.
There is no question but that the attack against the United States of America today was a vicious, well-coordinated, massive attack against the United States of America.
What kind of world do we live in? This is terrible. It's just awful.
Tonight, Washington is a ghost town. This is the Memorial Bridge, normally crowded with traffic. Yet the attack has succeeded in shutting down the capital of the United States and left Americans wondering, how could it have happened in this of all cities?
The White House, the Capitol, and the Pentagon are symbols of America.
Counterterrorism forecaster Marvin Citron authored a report in 1994 for the Department of Defense, warning of Washington's vulnerability to terrorist attack.
We predicted a plane could have crashed into the Pentagon. That's about as specific as you can be. If you made a right turn at the Washington Monument, you could hit the Pentagon. A left turn, you could hit the White House.
He advised back in 1994 that air traffic be controlled over and around all federal buildings, but he says this recommendation was not implemented.
People are wondering today how the Pentagon, which is the symbol of America's military power, could be hit by a plane. How could that happen?
Because we're a free society. The balance you've got in the United States is access and freedom to complete security.
Despite heightened security after the Oklahoma City bombing and barriers at the White House, Citron says Washington became complacent about protecting itself.
We've let down. We strengthened ourselves during Oklahoma because the crisis was there. We were in a crisis mode. Once we get rid of that mode, we go back to laissez-faire.
But is it even possible to protect Washington, a symbol of democracy, but also the nucleus of the country's power?
You cannot defend against this kind of an attack. The Pentagon is just one more Washington office building. That's all it is. It's not a fortress.
Noel Cook is a former Pentagon counterterrorism chief. Just this June, he authored a report warning that an attack of this kind was imminent. Now he says the nation has to face the reality of terrorism in our own backyard.
What's emotionally gripping is the feeling that this thing has come home to roost in a major way. We are vulnerable in ways that we never were prepared to admit to ourselves, and we're going to have to cope with that.
Marvin Citron concurs. He predicts a city under siege.
I think people are going to be more looking around. It'll look more like Israel, where the people there are accustomed to attacks from terrorists, and they're prepared, and they look for things. We'll do more of the same thing.
The first step for now, a show of determination by President Bush, who returned to the White House at the end of a tragic day, hoping to allay the fears of a stunned and terrified nation.
That's Nora O'Donnell, who covers Congress for NBC News and Washington in general.
Well, I would just guess here, speculation, that once they're in the cockpit, they probably know enough to put it on autopilot. They put it on autopilot, then they pull the crew out of the seats by either executing them or making them unconscious, and then they can get back in and fly. But first it would go on autopilot, so the airplane would be under control while they were doing this. And they probably know enough to do that, evidently, if they know enough to turn off the transponder. That'd be a guess anyway.
Yeah, but they made a hard left turn when they left Boston, according to the blip that we were able to follow on the tracking tape, and then they were able to make a couple of banking turns at low altitude here over Manhattan, and I think that there was at least one report that they did the same thing over Washington, D.C., perhaps over Lafayette Park. So it does appear that the people who were at the controls were skilled pilots, and if they were the terrorists, they were obviously highly trained.
Well, it's also possible that they hijacked the airplane before it took off. I'm just, again, a wild guess, so that they were actually in the cockpit at the takeoff. And if you know that the one down in the Caribbean that crashed, the hijacker was in the right seat while the captain was in the left seat. It's possible if he thinks they're just going to hijack the airplane, you'll do whatever they say. And if he says, I'm going to sit in this right seat, you take off, that's what you do, because you assume he's just going to go somewhere and land and refuel and that type of thing.
How difficult has this day been for you watching these planes being flown in the buildings and the Pentagon?
It was difficult at first, especially when I found out there were crews involved, and when I found it was United, it was even more so. But the whole thing has been very difficult. I have been busy most of the day and haven't seen an awful lot of it. But what I have seen is just, as the word everybody uses, horrific, and it's a very emotional thing for anyone.
Al Haynes, thank you very much for being with us. It still was a marvel of piloting that you did when you landed that plane in Sioux City, Iowa, that United Airlines plane that had lost most of its controls, and he was able to bring it in a controlled crash landing. They did lose some of the passengers, obviously, but any number of them were saved as a result of his great skills in the cockpit. We want to show you some remarkable scenes now from inside Air Force One. This is the fighter jet escort that Air Force One had as it flew back to Washington today from the Strategic Air Command headquarters at Offutt Air Force Base. That may become a routine procedure for the president as he flies domestically in this country as well as internationally. It's not always a conspicuous presence. You generally have planes when you're flying with the president over disputed areas that are in the vicinity, but you don't see them flying that closely off the wing of Air Force One. They're on their approach now to Andrews Air Force Base. That's an F-16. I think I can only see one tail sticking up, so I think it's an F-16 that helped escort them back to Andrews Air Force Base. Let's go to Dateline's Keith Morrison, as he has been taking the pulse of this country. America, in all of its complexity and all of its parts, becomes a family on a day like today. Here's Dateline's Keith Morrison.
In a moment, everyone knew things can't be the same anymore. And all across the country, as shock gave way to fear or anger or some other emotion, officials in charge of places and events shut them down. Suddenly, this is a country in which security means everything. Airports almost everywhere closed.
No airplanes will be leaving any of the airports in the United States until the ground stop is lifted.
Hundreds of people at airports all around the country crowded around TV sets, stunned.
It's unbelievable to me that people can crash planes in the World Trade Center and collapse on thousands of people. All the rescue workers outside there. It's absolutely devastating.
I don't think anybody in this nation is going to be able to sit down at dinner this evening or any evening from now on and consider ourselves to be completely safe.
It's just crazy.
The order to close for the first time the entire national air traffic system came early from the Federal Aviation Administration. Many of those airports were evacuated. For how long? Who knows? At least until tomorrow afternoon, perhaps longer. No one's ever done such a thing before, ever.
I think our security is going to be so tight tomorrow that you're not going to believe it. It's going to take a long time to get everybody cleared. I mean, they're going to be doing hand searches. They're going to be doing all kinds of stuff. It's going to be the top level of security that we have tomorrow.
Markets, of course, just stopped. How could they operate here? Already, the financial loss has been in the billions. And, said UCLA finance professor Bradford Cornell, it will hurt for some time.
Investors are likely to get frightened. That will lead to a dramatic drop in stock prices.
And now, says Cornell, now that many institutions and companies will try to be more careful about security, we'll keep paying.
That throws sand into the gears on which our economy runs. And it's going to make the cost of doing business greater, corporate profits lower, and that will depress stock prices and economic activity, even in the long run.
But that's for some other day. Today, nationwide, flags were lowered to half-staff. Many states closed their public buildings, courthouses shuttered, trials postponed, popular landmarks locked up. Seattle's Space Needle, the Disney parks on both coasts, even the U.S. Mint shut down. The national pastime went the way of the national mood. Baseball commissioners announced that the schedule is off indefinitely. And for the Emmys, postponed indefinitely. Who felt like celebrating?
This weekend is not the weekend to put on this telecast.
In Texas, thousands of people flocked to a prayer vigil at Southern Methodist University.
Help us to make sense of senseless acts.
Psychiatrist Dr. Stephen Kingsbury said he expects a lot of people will want to be overcautious for a while.
Our sense that we live in a safe society where we have good protections against external threats has been taken from us.
And a terrorism expert, Peter Chalk, who spoke to us over the phone because security kept him out of downtown Washington, told us overreacting towards safety might be a good idea for a while.
That symbolic message that's been transmitted across the world will have profoundly affected the image of the United States abroad, of invulnerability, and that the U.S. can be brought in to the very front line of this sort of attack.
And what wasn't shut down today, we are much more careful about guarding. The border with Mexico and with Canada closed for a while. Security around military installations like this one is at extraordinary levels, of course, also at atomic plants and the other sensitive places in the American infrastructure, which in the past had seemed impervious. No longer. The terrorism expert worries that in their fear and anger, Americans may decide it's time to end this country's famous openness. That would be a mistake, he says.
Without a doubt, I mean, one of the prices you pay for being in a democratic society is that you have to live with a certain risk threshold. The only way you could realistically counter a lot of these dangers is to have a closed society, but that's not what we're about.
America may be a little different after today, a little more conscious of external threat. As the psychiatrist said, we may have some new routines now.
Does that mean that there'll never be another hijacking or terrorist attack? Probably not. Does it mean the vast majority of us will feel safer? Definitely, eventually.
But not today. Today we interviewed the doctor in a park because security at his university office kept our cameras outside.
That's Dateline's Keith Morrison on the mood of this country on this stunning day that so brought together America in grief and shock, frustration and anger and determination to go forward as well. We do have some additional information for you. A top New York City police official said at the end of the news conference by Mayor Julie.
Of the airports that we've asked to be evacuated early on.
That unprecedented move spread fear throughout the city that terrorism might be heading west. The city went into high alert. Federal buildings, City Hall, and the courts were all evacuated, and that was just the beginning. The chief of police attended an emergency council meeting and went on television to try and calm people's fears.
We certainly want to again reassure the public that all is safe in the city of LA. We certainly have no guarantees, but we're certainly looking at all of the precautionary measures to ensure that the community is as safe as possible.
And while there were no terrorist incidents, nonetheless, businesses came to a standstill. Disneyland closed its doors not just in California, but throughout the world. Virtually all studios closed down, including Jay Leno, who suspended production for the rest of the week. Tonight's Latin Grammys were also canceled. So was Madonna's concert and sporting events for the near future. Even the Emmys canceled Sunday's award ceremony.
A celebration and a comedy show would just not be something that would be appropriate for this country this weekend.
By mid-afternoon, the state's governor felt it necessary to go on television and reassure all Californians that their state was indeed secure.
First of all emergency services operations are up and running throughout California. Secondly, all law enforcement and firefighting personnel at the state level are fully deployed.
But despite the pronouncements from elected officials, this was a state in fear and shock.
It's like a movie. I can't believe that it could happen in this country.
And while thousands of Los Angelinos were stranded and frightened, the real concern here was for New Yorkers and for the families here in Los Angeles who had loved ones on those planes. American and United Airlines asked the Salvation Army and the Red Cross to be available today to offer pastoral and ministerial services to the families of victims.
It's just to be there and to say to them, we are here and we'll do whatever we can do to help you through this trauma and this pain.
Tom, it's important to note that neither American Airlines or United Airlines have officially released the names of the passengers on those 4 flights. But however, some family members have released some names, most notably David Angel and his wife Lynn were on the flight from Boston here to Los Angeles. Angel is well known as the producer, one of the producers of the hit television show Frasier. His colleagues released a statement this afternoon calling him an incredibly talented, kind and gentle man, a man of incredible personal faith as well. He perished on that flight. Also, as we've been reporting, I know you have also Barbara Olson. She was the wife of Solicitor General Ted Olson. She was on the flight from Washington to Los Angeles. She was one of the few passengers on several of these flights who managed to make a cell phone call to her husband where she told him that they were being hijacked. Moments later, her plane crashed into the Pentagon. Several other names have trickled out, but we don't know whether their kin have been notified, so we don't want to go out out and actually tell you who they are. American Airlines and United have both asked us to publicize 800 numbers that they have put together. This is for family and friends who have questions, who want information about whether loved ones actually did get on those flights. The United hotline is 1-800-932-6555, and the American Airlines hotline is 1-800-245-0999. And they're quick to point out that people who are just who have no real personal connection should not tie up these lines. These are phone numbers for families, for concerned members of families who might have loved ones on those flights. But people here, you can, if you flew over this city today, you wouldn't even recognize it because these normally clogged freeways were virtually empty. Many people kept their children at home from school, although the school system did go on as usual, and people have been asking the city to return to normal. But very much, this was a city very much in shock this morning. Throughout the day, people thought this terrorism might be headed this way. So we'll continue to keep you up to date on the California situation. Tom?
Thanks very much, NBC's Maria Shriver. I suspect that was the case across the country as well, even for cities and small towns that were not the destination of these airplanes, that things did come to a stop today because it was one of those events in which America coalesces around its sense of national identity and shares the television set as well, trying to keep abreast of what has been going on. We're joined now by New York Governor Pataki, who has been down at the scene.
Ingrid, what are you seeing? What are you hearing? What do you know?
We were standing at our location as close as possible to the site of the destructive former World Trade Center towers when police and military came running towards us and started evacuating us about, I would say, 7 to 8 minutes ago, telling the to leave everything behind, that another building was about to collapse or implode. It was not quite clear at the time it's not quite clear right now which building it is. Looking at it from my standpoint, I'm now about 6 blocks away from the site of the World Trade Center towers, and they have qualified as the building on the left on Broadway. I believe our cameraman here left our signal in the middle of all this, but some have pointed to the tallest modern black building in that area, pointing to areas that we can't see from here, saying it's starting to bubble. They have pushed all the way back, about several blocks back. We have left things behind at our original location. There is not much more that I can say, however. The sirens and everyone came running. It was absolute pandemonium, and everyone is standing back. The police saying, go north. You know, if you want to save your life, get the hell out of here.
Okay, Ingrid, just take a deep breath here. Make sure you're in a safe location. We now believe the building is 1 Liberty Plaza, which is in that extraordinarily tight complex of buildings that surround the Trade Center. Ingrid, do you have any idea how big that building is, how many stories it is?
I'm trying to get the information. I would say that this is at least a 59-story building, but that's really an estimate. It's tall, modern, black. If some people...
So you're eyeballing this at 59 stories is what I think what you're saying to me. And officials are telling you it's starting to buckle. Is that the word they used?
President Bush and his advisors are still studying.
Ingrid, did they use the word buckle? Well, we've lost our producer down, and we want to get her, frankly, let's just get her out of an area that may be dangerous to her and the people with her. But again, officials are moving people away because of the danger that a building, 1 Liberty Plaza, may be on the verge of collapsing, starting to buckle. We're keeping an eye on it as we talk to you. You know, the one point to make here very quickly is that one of the reasons this rescue operation is going so slowly is because it is so dangerous there that they just don't, it is so unstable that buildings can go almost in a moment's notice, and they're not, if they can avoid it, lose anybody else. Ingrid, can you hear me now? Well, if she can, I can't hear her, so let me assume now that she cannot. Again, rescue workers and anybody else who's managed to make their way into the area being pushed back. Try to get out of harm's way, as there is a danger. The One Liberty Plaza, roughly 59 stories or so, may be on the verge of collapsing, and that would be the fourth building to go down. And as Gary Tuckman reported to us about 15 minutes ago, in 10 blocks on either side of the Trade Center, there is extensive damage to buildings, some destroyed, others extensively damaged, some of those obviously perilous. And police and military people down there are trying to make sure that in this calamity nobody else dies. We will keep an eye on that, but we will move on briefly. Robert Gates joins us from Kansas City. He's the former CIA director. Director Gates, are you able to hear me okay?
Yes, I hear you fine.
And forgive me if I keep one eye kind of on the back of me here as I watch to see what's happening with this building. Have you heard from your former colleagues in the intelligence community? Can you give us any sense of the kind of information they are picking up, or at least the volume of information they are picking up at this point?
No, I have heard nothing from them. I think they have higher priorities right now, but I'm sure it's a wide range of information from a variety of sources, technical and human.
And when we talk about technical for a second, this is the interception of phone calls and that sort of thing?
Well, I think everyone has a pretty good idea of it. I think, frankly, as the President and others have said, there's probably already been too much specific talk about just exactly what kinds of information they're gathering.
Mr. Gates, I'm having a little audio problem, so forgive me if I ask you to repeat something. It is that I was unable to hear you for a moment, and we'll try and solve that. But just is the entire intelligence network now focused on this issue, this crisis?
No, that's a luxury that American intelligence can never afford. The truth is that in addition to devoting enormous resources to trying to help with this investigation and find out who was responsible, they also have to keep a lookout for additional such moves. They have to keep a lookout on developments all over the world. So they certainly are devoting huge resources to this problem, but it's not the only problem they can look at.
In moments like this, and I know that there is no moment precisely like this, is the intelligence community essentially depressed? Do they see themselves as having failed?
No, I think right now they are probably so focused on helping with the investigation, on probing all of their sources, on looking back through all of the information that's been collected over recent weeks to see if there are isolated bits of information that were meaningless then but might help put the picture together now, that they really don't have time to reflect on what might have been or whatever they might have done that wasn't done, and so on. Those kinds of thoughts will come later, but I think they're probably totally focused on the job at hand right now.
There's just simply too much work to be done right now.
Absolutely.
Director Gates, it's always good to talk to you. It's good to talk to you again today. We apologize for the problems that we've had. As you could see, we were listening to Director Gates through a two-way radio here. It is a little difficult. The city is not running smoothly, folks, and we are doing the best we can to keep us going. Let's go back to Judy in Washington.
Aaron, a little while ago, you were talking with our correspondent Gary Tuckman, who's been there very close to the World Trade Center site. And Gary, you're on the phone now. We've been reporting that this One Liberty Plaza building is very much at risk now.
That's right, Judy. We were just telling you in our report a short time ago that the rescue and recovery workers on the scene were very concerned about a building that might possibly collapse into the wreckage of the World Trade Center. Well, it was another building that is now prompted an evacuation order. It's the One Liberty Plaza building. It's just to the east of the wreckage of the World Trade Center. We've been told by some other people they were concerned about that building too. So workers who are on the scene, and we estimate there are between 1,000 and 2,000 people who are on the scene. It's a 10-square-block area, are now being told to leave, and the members of the news media who've joined us 4 blocks away from the wreckage have been told by police that they must evacuate the area. And as a matter of fact, I'm in a building right now talking to you on a telephone, a building about 5 blocks away from the World Trade Center, and we are being told we now have to evacuate this building where this phone is located.
Gary, how close to so you have to hang up right now?
I have probably time for one more question, Judy, before they kick me out of here.
Well, just tell us how far away from the World Trade. You said 5 blocks, right?
Yeah, I would estimate we're about a quarter of a mile. It's 20 blocks to a mile in New York City. We're about 5 or 6 blocks away.
Right.
So we're probably a quarter mile away. So they're evacuating most of the buildings. Most of the buildings are closed, to be honest with you. This particular building is a New York City building, and they are now evacuating this building.
All right, Gary Tuchman, we're going to let you get out of there as fast as you can. Aaron?
Judy, Gary, get away here. Just get to safety. We can see the building in question, and we actually, from where we are, and perhaps if we can zoom through it closely enough, you'll be able to see it as well. It is this tall gray building that is just off to my left. Let me get out of the shot here so you can see it. And we can see just with the naked eye, and I'm not sure precisely what you can see in the monitor, whether it's better or not. We can see what looks to us at least like glass falling or parts of the building peeling off. We're looking probably halfway up the building and up. We can't see the lower half. We can also see, and I want to be careful here because I can't honestly tell you that I know it's related, but there seems to be a bit more smoke, dust, ash in the area. Whether that's related to this or not, I honestly don't know. But I do know that there is more of it in that area than there was before. The smoke now rising up and obscuring our view of that building. But again, that is the building in question, One Liberty Plaza. And you can, if you've been with us, and I know many of you have a sense of the proximity to the Trade Center buildings. It is not far away. And just to look at it, if you were just to look at it, you would not have a sense that it had been damaged. But we can see windows flaking off, parts of the front flaking off, and we believe that is where the danger is right now. Judy?
Aaron, I'm told that getting underway here in Washington right now, a briefing by the Federal Emergency Management Agency, popularly known as FEMA. I'm not sure whether it's started or is in progress. Actually, it's in New York City, in your neighborhood. Let's listen in and see what they're saying.
Whether it's possible to do, but
okay. All right. I'm told now that it is about to get underway. It has not started yet. And while we're waiting for that FEMA briefing, let's go back to our national security correspondent, David Ensor. David, we had to interrupt your report just a few minutes ago. You were giving us a little bit more information about what you're learning from your intelligence sources.
Well, that's right. As former CIA Director Bob Gates just said on our air, the CIA and the intelligence community have to keep looking at a lot of issues, including future threats, but they are also putting tremendous resources into the effort to try to ascertain who did this, and they're working on it day and night.
U.S. officials say they have specific information indicating the terrorists had links with the group led by Osama bin Laden, the accused terrorist mastermind. In closed sessions, the Senate and the House were given briefings.
There had to be some brains behind this. We have some good, promising leads. They're obviously being followed.
Publicly, the Bush administration is accusing no one so far, while warning nations they too will pay for any help given to those who attacked New York and Washington.
We will hold accountable those countries that provide support, that give host nation, if you can call it that, support and facilities to these kinds of terrorist groups.
Afghanistan's Taliban government has long offered haven to bin Laden, but U.S. officials say they have no evidence thus far of any state directly assisting the attacks in New York and Washington. Many analysts argue that such a coordinated broadside could not have been possible without it.
Osama bin Laden represents a complete terrorist network.
he will have one or more state sponsors, countries that he's either based in or working in collusion with. There'll have been passport support, communication support.
One thing I think that ought to make us a bit suspicious about whether bin Laden was involved in it alone or not is that he goes to great lengths to advertise himself. And when you see something like that, you begin to wonder whether or not there may be an effort to draw our attention solely to him, to the neglect of someone who may be his principal contractor.
If there was state support, a number of terrorism experts point to Iraq as the most likely suspect. A statement from President Saddam Hussein on Iraqi television said, quote, "The United States reaps the thorns that its rulers have sown in the world."
U.S. officials say they are developing good intelligence and law enforcement leads. They are not sure, they're not ready to say yet who they think was behind these attacks, nor are they ready to say whether they think any state was involved in helping, but they do believe they will be able to say quite soon. Judy.
All right, David Ensor, thanks. And I'm now told that up in New York, that briefing, Federal Emergency Management Agency briefing, we're perhaps going to hear from New York City Mayor Rudy Giuliani and New York United States Senator Charles Schumer, among others. Let's see if that's gotten underway. I'm having a hard time seeing my monitor here. Here we go.
Senator Schumer, Senator Clinton, all of the members of the congressional delegation, Congressman Rangel, Congressman Meeks, Congressman Nadler, who's here, I know. He was at our briefing earlier. Thank you. This show of support for the city of New York means a tremendous amount to all of us in the city. We know how much you care. We know how much you're going to help us and have already helped us. And we have to all work together now and work together to make sure that we save as many lives as possible, rescue the people that we can rescue, and rebuild the city of New York and the World Trade Center to be even greater and more wonderful and more beautiful than it was before. And I know with the kind of support that we have from the administration, from the Senate, from the House, the people of the city of New York are very well supported. And thank you very, very much for coming. And thank you for all the efforts that you're making for us.
Thank you, Mr.
Senator.
Well, thank you. Well, thank you, Rudy. And on behalf of New York's congressional delegation, Senator Clinton, Congressman Rangel, our dean, Congressman Meeks and Nadler, we want to thank you. First, I've got a couple of points here to make. First, I want to thank the mayor and governor for the great job that they have done. We have watched television, and I have heard from more than 20 senators that they feel, as bad as they feel about this, they feel relieved with people like Giuliani and Pataki down here in charge and keeping things as best as they can be under these difficult times, so we thank you. I also want to thank President Bush. I spoke to the president yesterday. He assured me that he was going to do everything, and his administration was going to do everything that it could do. He said, "You have a blank check." And what we are here, what Hillary and I and the delegation are here to do, is assess the damage, make an inventory list, and go back to Washington. I've told Joe Alban, I'll talk about him in a minute, and others, that we may need the kinds of help that are different than usual disasters. We not only have the so many people who have been lost and the buildings that have been lost, but we have a financial services industry that has real trouble. We have insurance debts that are enormous. We have everything. And so the beauty of this display is that it's the federal, state, and city governments working together. We are Democrats, we are Republicans. Nothing stands in the way of us helping the city that we love so much. Let me just make a personal point now. I fly back from Washington. My family lives here 3-4 times a week. When I flew over the site today, I felt sick to my stomach. Usually I fly, I see Staten Island, the Verrazano Bridge, I see my house and Prospect Park, and then after the Statue of Liberty were these two beautiful tall towers that symbolize New York. and they're gone and replaced by a pile of acrid smoke. And literally,
as we listen to Senator Charles Schumer of New York, we're showing you pictures of the Pentagon where they are unfurling an American flag in anticipation of a visit there today by President Bush. We're told he is to go there to inspect the damage, the site where the plane hit the Pentagon yesterday morning. And now let's go back to New York.
the Hudson River Park. They cannot stop New York. They will not stop New York. And we will bring every bit of federal aid that we can to make this city, as pained as we are now, rebound from the tragedy. And it's a big job, but we're going to do it. Let me call on my colleague, Senator Clinton. And then I'll introduce Joe and the governor. Do you want to? And the governor can take it.
Well, first, we wanted to be here this afternoon to visibly demonstrate the strong commitment that we feel from our colleagues in the Congress on both sides of the aisle, and the very strong support that we've gotten from the President and the administration. Before Chuck and I left, we passed a resolution 100-0 in the Senate, and it denounced this evil act of terrorism, and it repeated America's resolve, because it's very clear that this attack on New York is an attack on America. It's an attack on every American, no matter where he or she lives. It also contained a strong statement of our unified commitment to rebuilding and reconstructing, as the mayor said. So we will continue to work with all of our colleagues and the administration to make clear the extraordinary needs for resources, not just today and tomorrow and next week, for months and years to come, that will have to come from the American people and our government. I also just again want to thank the mayor and the governor for their leadership, and I particularly want to thank our firefighters, our police officers, our emergency medical technicians, and all of the help at all of our hospitals. You know, the people who've really been on the front lines, and many of whom we know have already lost their lives doing their duty to help everyone else. I don't know that there's ever been a time when an act of war, and that's what this was, called into action better prepared, more resolute, or courageous soldiers on the front lines to defend our country. But we saw that, and we're seeing it. And all of America, from everything we're told and the response that we're getting, understands that. And I believe that America will be behind New York in a way that will send a message to anyone near and far that, you know, New York is America, and America stands ready to defend what we care about, and that's this city and its people. And I thank everyone who's really been doing the hard work of trying to save lives, and we have to continue it, and we have to do everything possible to make sure that every life is that's possibly can be saved is. Thank you.
Okay, why don't we, before we call the governor and Joe, Charlie Rangel's the dean of our delegation and representing our delegation. Let Charlie say a few words.
Thank you. I think our New York delegation is probably the most bipartisan delegation in the House. But now the whole House has become a delegation in support of our country. I've been in combat, but I've never seen the type of heroism that I've seen with the New York City Police Department, our firefighters, our emergency medical service, and the leadership provided by our mayor and our governor. And so, like with any family, they've hit us, they've stabbed us in the back. They're cowards in what they've done, but it's going to really test the will of our country. And our strong Congress is there, the House and the Senate, to say, as we have in any war, we're not only going to come back, but we're going to win, and to make certain that this type of thing, that people will know that you just don't do it to us as Americans. And again,
don't just put this behind us, but we come back stronger than ever. We need to do it together. The mayor and his team here in the city have done an incredible job, and we cannot thank them enough. The state has been there in every way we can to be supportive and helpful and make sure we get through this. but we're all in it together. America is behind us. The fact that you're here makes us confident that America is behind us. And with that support from a bipartisan delegation in Congress and from President Bush, we're going to show the rest of the nation, we're going to show the rest of the world that the New Yorkers are not intimidated by terrorism, that we don't surrender to this type of cowardly act, but we will come back stronger than ever. I want to thank President Bush. I was on the phone with him before 9:30 Tuesday morning, and I've been on the phone with him since. And I want to thank Joe Albaugh for being here with us this evening. You know, Joe, the first words he said to me weren't hello. It was, what do you need? What can I do to help? It's that type of attitude, that type of spirit that is getting us through this. And Director Albaugh, I want to thank you because you've already helped enormously. Every single request we've made of the administration has been met, and we're confident as we have additional requests as we go forward, they will be met as well. This is an outrage against New York. This is a criminal act against America. This is a threat to our way of life, to freedom around the world. And we will stand united and win over this barbarism and make sure New York is stronger and America is stronger than it's ever been. Thank you. God bless you.
Thank you, George. And the final person is going to speak is the man who we really thank. Before I do that, I did have one thought that I've circulated among my colleagues, and I think it's a good one. And that is that I am joined by many others asking all New Yorkers to take an American flag and fly it out of their window. Whether you have a home, an office, a shop, let those flags fly. Let that be a symbol of unity for New York. Let that show these evil, despicable people that they cannot daunt our spirit. And in that way, we will show the kind of unity and fervor. People know what they want to do. They've been doing lots of things. But just letting the flag fly from your window, whether you live in a private home, an apartment house, or an office, whether you're in an office, will really show them that we are Americans and we're proud of it. FEMA is a very, very important agency in the federal government. You don't know it until there's trouble. But they come in and they solve problems. It's been a remarkably nonpartisan agency. It's an agency that brings people together as we have all been brought together. It's an agency that is expert at solving problems. This is a different problem than we've ever faced. Hillary and Joe and I talked on the airplane this afternoon about the various new types of challenges that we meet. But we have a great leader in FEMA who cares, who's going to be up here for several days, helping us take inventory so that we can request of the President, who, again, I want to underscore his generosity and his immediate availability, so that we can make an inventory and go back to the House.
We're listening to elected officials in New York State, New York City, the mayor, the senator, U.S. senators, the governor. These are politicians who normally are at each other's throats, but in the aftermath of this horrific tragedy, they have come together to say they will work together to do what's necessary to provide the resources to put New York City back together. In the end, they're hearing Senator Schumer say he'd like for every American to hang a flag out their home, their shop, their office. And we're looking at a picture, Aaron, of that building, One Liberty Plaza, that we're keeping a very close eye on.
Yeah, we sure are. At various points, the wind will shift and the smoke will cover, and it's hard for us to see these pieces either of window or of facing, if that's the right word, facing falling off the building. But every 20, 30 seconds, it seems like another piece falls. People have been told to get out of the area. One of our producers has essentially was told to run for your life. From our vantage point, we see a somewhat contradictory scene, to be perfectly honest. On the one hand, it is clear to us that people have been moved to the north, moved away from the building that is at risk, and building number 7, which has collapsed. On the other hand, that fire truck that has been there pumping gallon upon gallon of water on the fire in building number 7, which collapsed yesterday, continues its work, and those people continue to do those work. There are not a whole lot of people in that area right in front of building 7. There have been more throughout the day, and as we've watched this, Now everybody seems about 3 or 4 blocks farther back than they were, and we assume here, this is an assumption, that that is true on all sides of these buildings, that everyone is being pushed away. We have a correspondent, Gary Tuckman, down there.